Good. You guys here for the power talk? Power system mistakes? Nope, nope. All power systems over here. Um, so just a show of hands, who's like a full-time van lifer? Full-time, sold their house? Not too many. Okay, a couple. Awesome. Who's like a part-time, they have a home base? All right, cool. And who's aspiring? Maybe that you're not on the road yet, but you're doing your research. Okay, great. Well, my name is Ross Lukeman. I teach people how to build mobile power systems. And I have this presentation board here. I'm not sure if everybody's going to be able to see it. Some of you guys might move more towards the center. I've got kind of a pro system here. And we could call this Mobile Power Pro, and this one would be Mobile Power No. And we have a bunch of mistakes. Just a show of hands, or if you guys could holler out, do you have any particular problems or parts of your system you're working on, like solar, alternator, that I could address?
I noticed that some of the alternator chargers that they have out there, they're recalling them because of fires on vehicles.
Okay, I can speak to that.
I don't know what's going on. Solar. Preventing me from
Solar.
buying an alternator charger.
Okay. So the gentleman here wants to talk about the DC to DC alternator chargers. Some of them have been catching on fire. We have a gentleman that wants to talk about solar. And what were you?
How do you put all of that in a small van?
In a small van? Well,
I've got a 2002 GMC Savannah that has no space left.
yeah. Well, we'll talk about that today. So as you can see, the system on the left is a little bit more compact. And the system on the right is kind of spread out. We've got multiple bus bars. And we'll just kind of go through some of the mistakes here. As you can see, the system on the right, everything is a little bit crooked. And that's not going to hurt you electrically, but it's going to hurt you on your resale. And if you are a professional installer, this is going to cast. Everything's a little bit off. It's not orthogonal. So as you can see here, everything is on a 90-degree angle, even the cables. And this is just going to, when you go to do your resale of your vehicle to get your investment back out, this is going to maintain your investment, and it's going to give confidence to the buyer that all of your stuff has been programmed correctly, things like that. The other thing here, speaking about DC to DC chargers, one of the big things that happens is people don't respect the spacing requirements. I had a student that his DC to DC charger did catch on fire, and it caught his the plywood next to it on fire. He had put it up into a corner, didn't have a lot of space, and maybe ignored what the manual said about spacing, and the temperature overrides, they don't always shut down. They're supposed to shut down if they get too hot, and we don't want to rely on that. And it caught his van on fire, and if he hadn't have been around, he could have lost the whole van. So that's one of the mistakes. If you look at these batteries, these two have a 1-inch space between them. Batteries don't typically get very hot, but they do have spacing requirements, like 1 inch here. And so in this system, we've ignored that spacing requirement and put them right next to each other. And another thing that is missing with these batteries is they're not really bolted down. Whereas over here, you can see we have some type of mounting system. A lot of the higher end batteries are going to come with some kind of bolt down system. If they don't have that, if you get the less expensive batteries, you're going to want to make some kind of assembly. You could use L-iron steel from Home Depot, spray paint it, bolt it to the floor. That's going to hold the batteries from shifting around. And really what we're doing with that is, by not allowing everything to shift around, we are ensuring that these bolts stay tight. Because as you saw coming out to this park, you have the washboard roads. And so it's easy to build this in your driveway and everything looks good and tight. But if you go out, say the Alcan Highway, you head up to Alaska, it's going to take a beating and have tons of vibration. And once these loosen up, they're going to get hot, especially if you turn on an air conditioner or a stove and you're pulling a lot of current out of these batteries. It's going to get really hot, and then things can catch on fire. So that's another fire hazard. And so just to back it up, the reasons why, what we're talking about today is protecting your investment, fire safety, so that you or your vehicle don't burn up, and as I said, resale value. So another mistake here is these cables are dead straight, and as you go down the road, the batteries are vibrating. There's no flex in these cables, and so in general, we don't want to make cables that are too long. Every cable is a resistor, and you're going to have a power loss down that cable. So we don't want to go nuts making cables extra long, but there are cases where you do want to make them a little bit longer so they can flex and take those vibrations and not work the bolts loose here. So moving on here, there is kind of a glaring mistake that I see a lot here, which is people will buy all black cable, and instead of buying half black, half red so that it's clear like this, they'll buy all black, and they'll use the heat shrink to kind of color code everything, which is, it's kind of obvious right here, but once that cable runs a few feet away, it can get very confusing as to whether that's positive or negative. And so that's kind of something where people save a little bit of money on the front end, but they may really kill their resale value, because when you do this, again, it's going to cast a lot of doubt on your the quality of your work and your programming, things like that. Another big mistake here is the fuse is very far away from the batteries, and so what's going to happen here is this is kind of a liability. If anything cuts through this cable, there's no fuse upstream from it to prevent a fire. So if this gets cut on the frame of your van or something like that, it's going to basically immediately catch fire. So that's why you're going to want to put the main battery fuse within 7 inches here of the main battery positive terminal. And the other thing that's wrong here is the fuse type. How are you guys doing? Is this too technical? Are you guys picking this up?
No, it's great. Please continue.
Okay, okay, good. So we have three of the same fuses here. These are mega fuses, which are good for chargers or loads, things like an inverter or a DC to DC charger. But they don't work for battery fuses, because if you short circuit, especially a lithium battery, it's going to dump out thousands of amps of current. And we want to be able to stop that. And there are only certain fuse types that will stop that amount of current. And so that would be a Class T fuse, probably the best. We have an MRBF fuse, which is a marine rated battery fuse. It goes right on the terminal. It's very clean, very easy to do. We fused it right at the source, and then we can go on. We don't have to worry about adding a fuse upline or downstream from that. And the last one is going to be an A&L fuse. So those are the 3 types that are approved based on the marine standards from ABYC. And I'll say that with the marine standards, a lot of their purpose is to help boat owners get insurance. So if you build to those standards, then the insurers will insure your boat. And so the RV and van industries would do well to follow those ABYC standards, because it's made to prevent your boat from catching on fire in the middle of the ocean. So if we follow those standards, it's a good strategy for us as well. So yeah, you always want to have that switch as your first stop, and then the switch, the fuse is first, the switch would be second. And then as you can see, as far as real estate not having a lot of space, you can see this takes up a lot more space. And I don't work for Victron, but I use these Victron Links distributors in every system because it's very compact. So you can see our positive and negative bus bars have been kind of crammed together here. And we've also been able to attach our switch directly onto the positive bus bar. And what we're doing also by making this so compact, I'll add that there are 4 fuse blocks in here as well. So we've crammed a lot of infrastructure into a very small area, and we've made it more efficient from an electrical standpoint, because every time we have a junction like this going through the switch, a fuse, a bus bar, you lose a few millivolts. It's like a little speed bump for the electrons. And so we don't want to have link to link to link to link. So this eliminates a few of those links. It's going to be more compact, and it's going to be a little bit more efficient. Let's see. We've got a lot of mistakes here. So I'm going to, on this large cable, let's say you needed to purchase larger heat shrink to seal that up. And some people might say, I don't want to buy more heat shrink, I'm out of time. So these don't have any heat shrink, and so the bare copper is exposed. Bare copper is a fantastic conductor on day one when it's clean and pretty. But as soon as it starts to corrode, again, it's going to have more resistance, and it's going to be like a little speed bump there. And the bad thing about that is, with greater resistance, if we put a large load through that cable and it's corroded, it's going to get very hot again. So your heat shrink prevents corrosion, which prevents heat. And let's see. Another glaring mistake here is we have a large load with, say, a 4-aught cable. This might go to your inverter that's running your air conditioner. And so what some people do is, maybe this cable is specified in your inverter manual. It tells you the cable gauge, but then from there back, you're kind of designing that yourself. And this is most of the design that people have to do. A lot of the stuff from here out to the devices, it'll tell you the gauge and the fuse size in the manual for that device. But from here back, we have to design it. And so you want to look at that largest load. We have a 4-aught cable, but it's being fed by, let's say, a 2-gauge cable, a tiny cable here. And so just like if we were looking at this with water pipes, we wouldn't want to feed a big pipe with a small pipe. And so this is kind of creating a choke point that is going to, if we run that big appliance off of this large cable, we're going to have a massive voltage drop here. It's going to get hot. And there are a couple things we can do with this fuse. Let's say this is a 400 amp fuse. We have to have, this has to be a 400 amp fuse to feed that largest load. So your largest load or charger, and the cable and the fuse for that is going to dictate your battery cable size. And your battery cable size doesn't have to be any bigger. So like, let's say your largest load is a 400 amp fuse. Some people say, well, I've got 1,000 amp hours of batteries. This is kind of a common mistake. I've got this huge battery bank, so I have to have a huge fuse and a huge cable feeding. And it's like, your batteries, this is just a fuel tank. And the rate of fuel coming out of here is going to dictate the cable and the fuse size. The size of the tank has nothing to do with the cable and fuse coming off of the batteries. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, it makes sense when we talk about it here. If our largest load requires a 400 amp fuse, then we have to have at least a 400 amp fuse off of our batteries. And with this setup here, we're kind of stuck because got a little wind. Where's Brian? Can you help? So this has to be at least 400 amps. Let's say we turn on this appliance and we've only got a 200 amp fuse here. This main battery fuse is going to blow and shut down all of our chargers and loads. And let's say a mistake might be to come in and say, well, the fuse blew, the rating was too low. Let me go ahead and bump this fuse up to 400 amps. And in that case, we've now created a fire hazard because this cable may be only made to carry, say, 200 amps. So amps is a measure of current, and we can think of it like current in a river. It's just a flow of electrons, and each cable gauge has a limit as to how many electrons per second can flow through it. And if we go over that, it gets hot and perhaps ignites the rubber jacket. So in this case, if we have a 200 amp fuse, it's going to blow. If we bump it up to 400 amps, now we've created a fire hazard where this is going to get hot. And especially if this device short circuits. So we're kind of caught. We can't increase the rating of this battery fuse without increasing the thickness of the cable. So the fuse and the cable are going to go together like a team. If you need more power, you have to increase both. And let's see. Any questions so far? Okay.
Don't understand anything about what, how that works.
Okay.
Like, how do you know how
Here.
many watts of
Here, I got a mic.
you
You got it?
understand what
Okay. Mine's coming. Do you want to, so she doesn't want to be on the mic. Okay. Okay,
I
so
just want to know how can we do the math to find out how much power do you really need?
okay. Yeah, so if we're looking at watts, everybody understands watts, right? Like a 60-watt light bulb. That's a measurement of power, and it's comprised of multiplying voltage by amperage. So let's say that we have 100 amps coming out of here. That's the flow. The voltage is going to be the pressure or the force of the electrons. So we're multiplying the volume of electrons by the force to get the power. So 100 amps coming out of the batteries at, let's say these are 12-volt batteries, that would be 1,200 watts of power. So 12 times 100, 1,200 watts. And with the voltage, these cables will carry up to, say, 600 volts. So we're not really threatening anything with the voltage of these low power DC systems. We are causing issues with the amperage. So amperage is what's going to make everything hot. And if you have too many amps flowing through a conductor or a piece of equipment, it's going to make it very hot. And that's why in the last couple of years, people have started to look at the 48-volt battery systems, to some degree 24-volt as well. By raising the voltage, you're lowering the amount of current that you have to send through the line to do the same job. So let's say instead of 12 volts batteries, we had 48 volts. Instead of sending 100 amps out to do a job, we'd send 25 amps to do the same job. So things are going to run cooler, and when we're talking about inverters, if you need a really big inverter that's going to run a building or a house, oftentimes you're going to increase the voltage because you just need more top-end power, and you don't want to send tons of amps through these cables and either get everything hot or have to use massive cables. And so in that case, you'll just run a higher voltage battery bank in order to do bigger jobs. And that's why the electric cars, they'll run at like several hundred volts, because they're decreasing the amount of amperage they need to run through the line to do the job. The power lines, the same thing. They run at super high voltage, so the current through the lines can be very low. And current also is what's going to cause your power losses. So the more current that runs through the line, the greater the voltage drop over that line, and then there's a resulting power loss there. So current is kind of the enemy. We want to reduce it, and or compensate for it by putting cables that are going to carry that amount of current. So I feel like I'm getting too technical here. Was that helpful? Kind of.
I need to run a fridge and a stove, and how do I know how much power I need?
Okay, so she needs to run a fridge and a stove, and she wants to know how much power she needs. For the fridge, I would look at the manufacturer's data, and they'll usually tell you a daily allotment that fridge will take. Fridges are a little bit ambiguous because it depends on how cold you set it and how hot or cold your environment is, your van. And so they'll usually just give you an average. I would say I use 25 amp hours a day in my daily calculations. That might be kind of a middle of the road. If you get a larger fridge, you might bump it to 30 or 35 amp hours a day, and that would be at 12 volts. And the other one, the stove. Yeah, so stove might be 1,800 watts. You could divide by your battery voltage. Let's say you use 12-volt batteries. 1,800 divided by 12 is going to be 150 amps. So 150 amps would come out of the battery bank to when that stove is on high. And that's another thing where the stoves is a little ambiguous, because you're not really going to run it on high. You're not going to run both burners on high. So what you could do, which would be a little bit more accurate, is you could plug it in at home. There's a device called a kilowatt EZ, and you could plug it in and you can get an instantaneous reading of what that appliance is pulling and use that for your calculations. So let's say it's only pulling 1200 watts instead of 1800. You have it cooking on medium. So 1200 watts divided by 12 volts of our battery bank is going to be at 100 amps instead of 150. It's going to drop to 100 amps coming out of the battery bank. And so every hour let's say you leave the stove on for 1 hour, we would get our amp hours. So 100 amps for 1 hour is going to be 100 amp hours. So to run the stove on medium heat for an hour, 100 amp hours. So maybe one of these batteries. So I'll be here the next couple of days. If anybody wants to talk, I'll be over hanging out at the Van Life Outfitters booth. So I can follow up with you.
I don't get that. So if you've got the refrigerator and you've got one of those little freezer things and you've got several other things that draw the power, do you add that all together and then do your arithmetic, or do you do each individual item and do that arithmetic?
You're going to do, so her question is, do you add them all up and focus on each item? And yes.
Or focus on each item?
You will need to look at each appliance, and the real differentiator is the runtime. So kind of like we're talking about the stove is a huge load, but if you only run it for 15 minutes, not too bad. Whereas let's say the refrigerator is a lesser load, but it's going to turn on and off 24 hours a day. So the refrigerator may end up taking more power on a daily basis than the stove, even though the stove is like 10 times more power to run it. It's only going to be on for 15 minutes. So when we calculate amp hours, we're looking at the amps to run that appliance multiplied by the hours. And so a lot of stuff is going to be 0.5 hours, 0.25 hours, and it's really not going to amount to much because the runtime is short. So you would do that. Everything's going to have a different runtime. Your blender might be 3 minutes. Your refrigerator be, 24 hours a day. Maybe it runs 25% of the time. So it's really going to be 6 hours a day. Yeah.
So kind of until we get to know what we're doing, kind of keep a track of how long you use each thing until you have a.
Yeah, well, you can track it. If you want real accurate numbers, you could do like the kilowatt EZ, or and then you could experiment and write down how long you use that. I wouldn't say that's necessary in a lot of cases. You could do a best guess, and then what you're going to do is you're going to overshoot it with your battery capacity, especially with these. Like these are representing maybe a 100 amp hour battery. They don't hardly even sell these anymore. A lot of the batteries some of them are like 460 amp hours. They're massive. So you end up saying, well, I need 300 amp hours, but here's a 460, and it just way overshoots your calculations. And that's where you get into, how many days do you want to go with no charging? Maybe it's a cloudy day, you've got the engine off, and there's no plug to plug into. How many days do you want to last? So you can take your calculations and multiply them, and then compare that to your budget and see how many batteries you want to buy. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, sir.
How would this work with the smart alternators that most of these vans have these days?
Smart alternator.
Yeah, because that charges our system battery on the van, but this is for basically for the accessories. So how do you charge them both with, say, one alternator? And some of these vans have two alternators, but a lot of them only have one.
Yeah. Well, I'll say with the alternator is set up to charge your starter battery at the factory, so it'll do that job. The smart alternators, they'll drop their voltage to save fuel, and so in some cases, like with the transits, we'll just you can do it's called SRC inhibit, and you can deactivate that feature where it'll maintain the voltage that it's sending, and so the DC to DC charger gets a stable voltage. But to your point, if you allow the smart alternator to raise its voltage and then stop, you get to a stoplight and it lowers its voltage, it will screw up the DC to DC charger, because that's looking for a certain input voltage over a certain threshold. If it drops below that, the charger cuts off, and then you start driving again, the alternator kicks back up on the voltage, the DC to DC turns back on. So it can be a real circus, but with the Ford Transits, we just deactivate that feature. Okay.
Hey Ross, how do you deactivate that feature on a Ford Transit?
On a Ford Transit, there's a 8-pin or 10-pin connector in the driver's seat, and it's like pin 3, and you're gonna ground it out to pin number 1. Just put a little jumper, and the computer will shut down that feature. Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Related question.
Mhm.
My van has it shuts off the engine when I get to a stoplight.
Okay.
I have a button that can override that. Would that do the same thing where it wouldn't drop the voltage from the smart alternator?
If the engine cuts off, the alternator voltage would cut out.
Right. So that would override it, so the engine stays on at stoplight. So would that then not need the smart alternator cable to Fluidity 2? Can you repeat the question? Charger 2.
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question here. So she's asking, she has the engine start-stop feature, and she's asking how that affects the alternator voltage, basically, and whether the DC to DC charger is going to be able to handle that. If you definitely want to get rid of that feature or turn it off if you want the alternator charging to work. My estimation, it would solve the problem. There is a possibility that even when the engine's running, the alternator voltage is still going up and down. And in that case, you would want to inhibit that exact feature. So these are all fuel-saving features that kind of screw up the DC to DC chargers. So, cool, thanks. Is anybody? Yes, sir.
The new induction.
It's got a mic.
Hi, thank you for doing this. The new induction technologies that are going into the stoves, can you speak of how does that impact, or does it impact, or is there improvement in efficiencies?
Induction technologies and what
Like
device?
stove tops, when you put a pan on, it heats up immediately.
Yeah.
You take the pan away and it's not hot. It's a safety. It's almost like a safety feature.
Yeah, so it's using, I guess, magnetism to heat. I would say the power consumption is going to be similar to other stoves. I'll say in general with the electric stoves, they are going to take a massive amount of power. If people really want to get off grid, you can add more batteries, but if you're going to run down a big battery bank, you got to have chargers to charge it back up. So now you need bigger chargers. If you do want to use propane or fuels like that for like an S-bar heater, for your air heating as well as your cooking, that will help you get more off-grid time for a given battery bank size. And I know that a lot of houses and apartments are all electric, and so people want to make their vans all electric. But once you disconnect from the power grid, it's a different game. And so all electric vans are going to require more batteries and more chargers to run those big electric appliances. Brian, do you have?
Yeah, so I had a quick question.
Okay.
To avoid those problems that you're talking about, battery sizing, cable sizing, all of that, you were describing load calculations. Can you go into that more? Because you're basically working backwards, right? Is that the idea?
Yes. So a lot of people will start their design with these components, and I want to buy my batteries, and I want to buy a DC to DC charger, and you really need to start with the appliances. That's kind of start with the end and then work backwards. And so you're going to list your appliances that you want to have. And again, you can kind of fudge the numbers, or you can say, hey, I'm going to throw some extra capacity in there in case I add a vacuum cleaner at one day. You know, like it doesn't have to be completely exact, but you kind of want to, if you're going to do an electric stove, you definitely want that on the list. And you know, how long are you going to run it? And you kind of need to put an estimate to the minute, and then you'll convert it to hours to get your amp hours. But yeah, just get your list of appliances. Each one's going to have the amount of watts it takes and the amount of minutes you're going to run it, and you're going to multiply those out. You're going to get the amp hours for each appliance, and you're just going to add them up. And then you're going to add any slop or overage or extra capacity that you want to have, or extra days that you want to have. So yeah.
Thank you. So, let's say you're really picky about your appliances, and you have at least one 48 volt appliance, right? Maybe an air conditioning unit. And so you have a full 48 volt battery bank to start with. But then you have appliances that you want that aren't all 12 volt, but also some 24 volt.
Okay.
How do you tackle that? Like, what warning, you know, ideally you would just have everything be 12, right? But let's say you're really picky and there's some 24 volt appliances you just got to have. What complexities does that add, and how do you mitigate any, you know, compactness issues or safety issues related to having two different kinds of step downs off your 48?
Well, let's see. So you would just, if you need to change the voltage, let's say your power plant here is running at 48, and you would just have different lines coming off of your positive and negative bus bars. So if you need to step down to 24, you would have a line that would go to your 48 to 24 converter. That would be one dedicated line here. Then you'd have a 48 to 12 converter on the next line. And then those converters could feed little fuse blocks if you had multiple items, or they could just feed the appliance directly. But yeah, they would just be kind of line items on your bus bar there.
Do you know of anybody who makes a all-in-one fuse block that would handle 24, 12 volt, and 120 AC?
Well, the 120 AC, you would want to separate that out. And as far as, I mean, you're pretty much going to get a bus bar. You want to get a bus bar and then connect whatever to it. And so in that case, you would mix the voltages all in one system. So this would be, let's say, at 48 volts. And then you could have some stuff go out at 48, some stuff step down to 24, some stuff step down to 12. But it would all be here. And then, like I said, depending on how many 24 volt items or 12 volt items, you could go from the converter to something that splits it out into branch lines, or you could just go straight to that one item. But yeah, it could all pretty much mix here. Yeah, great question, great question. Yes, sir. Brian. Oh, we have another one. Okay, 1 second, sorry.
Instead of running a converter for each voltage step, why wouldn't you just run a simple bus system and just not use as many batteries for each voltage? Instead of running a converter, like if he wanted to run 3 at 12 volt, 24, and a 48, or in 36, let's get it super complicated, he could just do 4, 3, 2, or 1 batteries to a simple bus bar instead of running 4 different converters. It'd be half the price and simpler.
Well, I would say you're going to run into problems with charging, because now you need different voltage chargers. Because whatever the battery voltage is, your charger has to run at that voltage. So if you had a 12, 24, 36, you'd have to have a charger feeding each battery bank. And then if you do, a lot of these systems that I build, they'll have 3 chargers, so it'll be solar, shore, and alternator power. And so you would have to duplicate those 3 sources for each voltage. So you really want to have kind of a home voltage, a main battery bank voltage, and then if you need to step it down or step it up for like a Starlink, a lot of people use Starlink, so you would step that up to 36 volts. But really it could leave here at, let's say, 12 volts, and then it would just hit a converter either directly off of here or off of your 12 volt fuse block, and it would boost it up to 36 and run to that device. Yes, sir.
I'm stepping up my batteries, and it's been
proposed I put a DC-DC charger in between my alternator and battery.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to understand is just how to size the DC-DC charger
Mhm.
that makes sense for my system.
Yeah, I would size it based on your alternator size. Um, the rule of thumb is you take like the rating of your alternator and cut it in half. So if you have a 200 amp alternator, you could maybe pull 100 amps. It also depends on the longevity you want. Maybe you bump that down to 70 amps if you don't want to load that factory alternator too much. Um, and then it just depends, like sometimes people don't need that much charging speed and they can turn things down. Um, like I had a customer, he's got a couple of multipluses, and another installer, I worked on his system, another installer had installed it, and they were turned down to charge at about half speed, and he didn't want as much heat because they were under the bed in his fifth wheel. And so you can turn things down for various reasons if you don't need the speed to be that high. But basically the amperage is going to translate to charging speed. If you cut the amperage in half, you're going to double the amount of time it takes to fill that battery. So a few variables. I don't know if I answered your question. You want to make sure you protect the factory alternator and don't overheat it too much. And then if you need, let's say you're going to rely on the alternator charging, and that's your main source for off-grid camping, then you want to take it up as high as you can. You may need to put multiple DC to DC chargers in parallel. For that, I recommend the Orion XS from Victron. That's kind of the only one I use anymore. And you can put a pair of them. They're 50 amps each. You can put a pair of them in parallel to get 100 amps off the factory alternator. And what's cool about them is you can derate them. So if you want to go easy on the alternator, you can install them. They're capable of 100 amps as a pair, but you can make them put out 40 amps each. And so they're only pulling 80 amps from your alternator. It'll run a little cooler, last a little longer, stuff like that. Anybody else have a question to that? Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
When you add all these components, does it impact, or how does it impact any type of warranties you might have with the original equipment in the van and or the components that you're actually installing? Different vendors.
Yeah. So with the vans, if you go to the van manual, they'll usually tell you how many amps you can pull for, let's say, an auxiliary load off of the stock alternator. And so it's basically a load that you're putting on that alternator. I think the new Sprinters say 40 amps. But they used to say 40 amps. Now if you get an auxiliary battery with the Sprinter, they'll give you up to 80 amps. Frankly, I think a lot of people ignore that. And I think it's okay. Mercedes is very conservative in their numbers. But yeah, they'll give you an amount of amperage that they want you to pull. And I will say, if you do buy a Sprinter, I would get the auxiliary battery from the factory, and they'll give you a nice fuse box inside the driver's seat base, and you can connect to there. And if your DC to DC charger stays on, it'll take down that auxiliary battery and preserve your engine battery, so you're less likely to get stranded. Yeah, just a tip. Is anybody? Yes, got one in the back here.
This is a bit off topic, but like Bluetti charging stations. Do you know much about the Charger 1 and Charger 2 of Bluetti?
I don't know that much about those. Does anybody have a Bluetti? Can you speak to that?
The Bluetti 2 just came out,
Here.
and it's a more robust charger.
Okay, so Bluetti 1 is older, and it's just going to the Bluetti. The Bluetti 2 came out like a month or two ago, and with that you can plug in solar panels and also a Bluetti backup battery. So you can be charging up to 1200 watts
Okay.
with the combination. I believe it's 800 with the Bluetti 2 from the alternator, and then solar panel. So with the Bluetti 1, you would have to switch back and forth on the whatever you're charging, whatever power station. You could only do either the Bluetti or the solar, and this allows you to plug the solar and a Bluetti backup battery into the inverter. Yes, and that is related to that smart inverter. And the Bluetti 1 doesn't have any capability for communicating. The Bluetti 2, the Charger 2 does. They have a port for that plug, but unfortunately they're not yet making the cable. So
Okay.
you either have to go through what I'm gonna go through, which is turning off the automatic shut off to the engine at every stoplight. I would have to do that every time I turn on my van, or make your own cable and do it that way. But it can communicate with the smart alternators.
Thank you. Yeah, so on the Goal Zero and the Bluetti, I think they're getting. Okay, let me finish this real quick. So the all-in-ones, they're getting better. They used to not accommodate alternator charging, and they've added that component. I guess for me, I put in breaker boxes and branch circuits all around the van. Everything's built in, and so to me, it's a little bit limiting in that they're expecting you to kind of plug in your appliances straight to the Bluetti, as far as I understand. And so a lot of the design is done for you, but you're maybe limited by that design. So I would say if it has the features that you want and has the charging ports that you want, then go for it. I think when you build the systems like this, you get a little bit more customizability. So it's kind of a trade-off. You want to have modularity plus no design work. Okay. Yeah. And we had another question. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm very, very new to van lifing.
Okay.
I know I came a little bit late to the workshop, but just in general, when I'm looking at power for my van's a no build, y'all. So it's very intimidating to me. Just listening for the last 40 minutes, I feel like I need to go to trade school and learn to be an electrician. I don't understand any of this, amps, wattage, volts. I don't even know what a Bluetti is. I am completely lost, and it's not your fault. You're doing a great presentation.
Thank you.
But all of this already intimidates me, so I'm kind of shutting down. I like trying to understand. So I guess my question is, if you're brand new to all of this, and you do not, I'm a low-income person. I do not have a big budget to pay for all this.
Okay.
I've watched a video where this woman's van was completely engulfed in flames because of a lithium battery. So that made me really scared. And so right now, my van is shut off 3 times in the last 3 days. I've had to get it jumped. And so I'm just wanting a little advice for someone just starting off. What is sort of the most basic, just to get me going and not getting cut off every time and having to wire everything into the walls of my van?
I mean, if you don't want to run branch circuits inside the walls, you could use like a Goal Zero or Bluetti and just plug into it directly. I would say if your van battery keeps dying, you probably have something hooked to it, a parasitic load. That's kind of a mistake that gets made, and that's why I was mentioning the factory auxiliary battery. A lot of times that's going to keep you from killing your starter battery, because if you have a backup camera or a stereo system or anything, it'll go on that battery. But I would say in general, if some installer somewhere hooks something to your starter battery and it drains, like my van in 2015, I built my first van, and I put a backup camera, and it would die if I didn't drive it for like 10 days. It would kill the starter battery, and eventually I moved that backup camera to the rear power system once I put it in. But yeah, you want to just let the starter battery start the engine, and anything else, get it off of that battery. So that may be what's going on. And then I would just say, if I was starting out and you don't know much about power systems, it all starts with your appliances. So you know, your laptop, your blender. Make that list, and those are your needs. And then you can talk to us here, and we can say, oh, you're going to need what kind of van do you have? And we can tell you how much solar is going to fit. And that's how you estimate your solar, is how much real estate you have on the roof. It used to be people would say, well, I have this many batteries, so I'm going to get this many solar panels. We can't do those calculations because we're not putting them on a house. We have limited real estate on our roof, so it's whatever will fit on the roof is your solar. And then what kind of camping you're going to do. Are you going to go to campgrounds where you're going to plug in all the time? Then it's real easy. But now your costs are higher because you have to pay to camp every night. So it may be higher upfront cost to be able to boondock and be off-grid. You're going to spend more on the van, but less on the campgrounds. So those are kind of some questions. So it's kind of be what appliances you have, how are you going to use the van, how often are you going to plug in. Those would be kind of some design questions. Cool. Great question. Does anybody else have a question? Yes, sir? Yeah. Yeah, just for anybody that wants to know, the Bluetti and the Goal Zero, they're kind of power systems in a box. So it's got a battery, it's got an inverter. It'll take AC or DC power, so it's got AC and DC chargers, and then it'll put out AC and DC power. DC would be like direct current straight from the battery, AC alternating current to run your household appliances. And I would say, as far as household appliances, just not to go down a rabbit hole here, but you don't want to go crazy with those. If you can get DC appliances that run straight off the batteries, there's no conversion. Anything you run through the inverter, I calculated you're going to lose about 18% of the battery power. So 18% of the battery power doesn't make it to the appliance when you run through an inverter. And so that's going to cut down on your off-grid time for a given battery bank. And so if you run for things like an air conditioner, they'll have DC air conditioners. It just runs basically, I say straight off the battery. It's going to run off the bus bars, but there's no conversion in there. And it doesn't really matter if the DC air conditioner is as efficient as the AC air conditioner. When you're not losing that 18 to 20%, you're way ahead with DC air conditioners. Let me. Okay.
So I bought an old, it's like a Bluetti.
Okay.
But it's a
Brand new brand.
It's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
It was highly recommended by a YouTuber.
Okay.
I did the opposite. I bought the power station before finding out how much power I need.
Yeah.
Do I need, besides my power station, some kind of electric system like that one?
No, I would be either or. So she's got an Opus?
Yes.
Yeah. An Opus power station, and that would negate the need for this. You would not need this. This is kind of like a custom system where you're going to calculate your appliances and you're going to estimate your needs, and maybe you enjoy this kind of stuff. But with that, I mean, it's either going to run your appliances or it's not. Depending on how big the battery capacity is. In that case, I would just road test it. And a lot of this stuff, what's nice about maybe all power systems is you just take them out on the road, go camping. If you run out of power, then you have a design flaw and you need to change the design. So with that, I mean, I would just take some camping trips and see if the battery capacity lasts. And
I brought it, but I don't have anything to hook it up. But yeah.
You don't have any appliances?
Last question.
Okay.
Foldable solar panel. I got a 240 watts.
Okay.
I thought I was going to be able to put it on the top on my roof. So I don't think I can do that with the foldables, right?
So she's asking about the foldable solar panels going on the roof. Typically, you would just lay that out in the sun. I encourage people to get a glass panel and mount it to the roof, just so you have less work when you get to the campsite. You're not having to run that thing out. It's a lot more cost, and the glass solar panels are not that expensive. They're probably cheaper than the foldable, but the mounting is going to be a project. If anybody needs to mount a solar panel, you should get with DIYvan.com out of Oregon. The guy, Hayne, he's an automotive engineer. He's made the best solar mounting stuff. It's hard to go back once you've used his solar mounts. But it is expensive. It's all like extruded aluminum, and it's not cheap. But once it's on there, you got solar. You don't have to throw it out when you get to the campsite. So you might look at that. But definitely just start with where you're at with your foldable panel and see if the battery inside this all-in-one will last, I would say.
AC and DC can be used at the same time?
Yeah, it's just whatever that appliance requires. So
But at the same time from the same power station?
it can. So the battery can feed multiple loads. Actually, you can have multiple loads at the same time and multiple chargers at the same time. And the electrons, they'll just find their way. So some of the power, this is kind of a rabbit hole, but in this system, I've got a battery monitor shown here. And so you might have a charger coming in, and let's say it's bringing 50 amps, and your battery monitor only says 30 amps are coming into the batteries. And that's because you have a load on, and the power is coming in and just going right back out to the load. So it won't all make it. That's why you have to have a battery monitor. Actually, this was drawn as a mistake. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the battery monitor is the last stop before the batteries, because not all the power coming in from your chargers makes it to the batteries. We had one more question in the back. Can I? She's actually right. Let me get her. She's right behind you. Sorry. I'll get you next. Can you, he's got the mic there.
Hey, I was gonna make a comment to the lady that said she's just starting out and asking what a Blue Eddy is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I didn't know where you were. I was gonna say, you know, when you get to where you're getting at, watch the sales on Amazon. Because like Prime Day, Black Friday, those times, they put pretty deep discounts on them. So you save a good bit of money. I just wanted to mention that.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. And there he is. Yeah.
Can you use two different sizes of DC-DC chargers together, such as a 50 and a 30?
You could. You could. They would top out and run at their max amperage. I think it would be okay. Yeah. Yeah. Brian, we got one in the back.
You'd mentioned AC and running it off of 120 volts versus 1224.
Mm-hmm.
So these Coleman Mach 5s, I guess they're the 120s, and they give about 13,000 BTU.
Uh-huh.
But you're paying that 18% price for conversion. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So if we went to a DC version, I'm seeing those coming in at 8,000 instead of 13,000, but I don't have to pay that 18% penalty for conversion. Is that about right? Am I getting that picture right?
Yeah, you don't pay the 18% to convert it from DC to AC, but I would watch your BTUs.
Right, 'cause I'm coming down about 7,000 BTUs, 6,000 BTUs.
I would watch that. I would look at like a Maybrew 12. If you have a 12 volt battery bank, they have a 12 volt Maybrew. I think it's 12,000 BTU.
Oh, Maybrew. M-A-Y-B-R-E-W?
M-A-B-R-U. And they were a marine company out of Florida here, and they make stuff for boats. It's a family company, and they just made like a van air conditioner. And the Van Life Outfitters guys, they love that air conditioner because they said they get the least returns. So if you ask them, they know which air conditioners get returned. Mabru, M-A-B-R-U. Sir, did you have a question?
Yeah, you're going to talk about that blue box in the top left corner at all?
Yeah, I mentioned this. So this is the Lynx distributor from Victron. Use this in every system. They have a M10 edition. I would get that. That's the new one. It's got 10 millimeter holes on the end. It bolts right up to these switches. It also bolts to these smart shunt battery monitors. But yeah, this is a pair of bus bars with 4 fuse blocks built in. And they're modular. If you need to tack on another one to get 8 lines instead of 4, you can tack them on. And this is part of the Lynx system from Victron. They've got several components in this family, but this is just kind of a no-brainer component that I use in every system, regardless of what batteries I have or what. It's just a very compact way to get your distribution and make sure everything's fused. And I'll go ahead and riff off of that. One of the mistakes over here is only 2 of the lines going out were fused. And so this is a mistake where people say, well, what needs a fuse? I say, everything needs a fuse. Everything that has current, if there's current running through that line, that means there's a full circuit. You have positive going out and negative coming back, and there's power flowing through there. That device could short circuit, and if there's not a fuse, you're going to have a fire. So these are all fire prevention, and we can't select which things we're going to fuse. Everything's fused. So as you can see here, we've only got 2 fuses. Over here we have all 4 are fused. The other thing I wanted to mention here is this smart shunt, and I like Victron. I'm sure there's some Victron fans here, but these smart shunts have been used in the past as battery monitors. They're great, and they, like I said, they'll bolt up right here to the Lynx distributor. It's very clean. There's actually a kit called the Lynx Clean Install Kit that basically makes all the components line up so they'll bolt to the board. Lynx Clean Install Kit is definitely, you want to check that out. But what happens is the batteries now have their own app, and so they'll have a state of charge that they'll tell you, and people will add the smart shunt in order to, let's say if you have a Servo GX, does anybody know what a Servo GX is? Yeah, some of us. So yeah, that's a central monitoring hub, highly recommended. And so the batteries won't talk to the servo, so we'll throw in a smart shunt as our battery monitor, and it'll have your battery state of charge show up on the Servo GX. So you have it all on one screen. The issue is then people are going to pull up their app for their batteries, and the state of charge might say 72%, and this one says 84%, and it's just, you're caught in a trap where the man with 2 watches never knows the time. Like, it's never going to match, and it's just frustrating. And so over here, I just wrote CAN bus here. So let's say if you have batteries like the Epoch Elite, they're going to have their app, and but they'll have a CAN bus connection, which is basically an Ethernet cord. You can run it out and plug it into the servo, and so your app matches what's on the servo. If you use the VRM online portal, it'll match the data online. Like, everything matches. And so Epoch is a good example because they have Epoch Essentials, which would be like a basic battery with a Bluetooth app, and then Epoch Elite, and they'll have 460 amp hours and 460 amp hours. And the Elite has some nice features, some mounting brackets and stuff like that. But overall, people are like, why would I spend more? I just need amp hours. I just need the 460. Why am I going to pay $500 more? It's the same size battery. And it's stuff like that. It's the monitoring and kind of the end user experience versus having none of your stuff match. And some people, it just drives them nuts, and they try to get it to match, and it's just not gonna happen. Yes, sir.
battery without doing it harm, without affecting its life. Do you have a personal opinion on how much you can run?
I would. I don't really. You know, I used to worry about that. With the LiFePo batteries, they're much better than lead acid because they have the BMS and it'll keep it inside the rails. Beyond that, I would say it's kind of like an engine. The batteries and the inverter, if you oversize them a little bit, they're going to have an easier time doing the job, and you're not going to be running them at their max. So I would say that would be an argument to maybe oversize your battery bank a little bit compared to what you're going to use each day. 80% depletion is kind of the industry standard where they're going to give you the number of cycles if you run it down to 80%. But it's like anything, if you run it down to 80% every day, it's going to do less cycles than if you run it down 50% a day. But at the end of the day, they're there to be used. I would put what you can and go out and use it. And if you wear it out, wear it out. I actually haven't seen anyone wear out their lithium batteries. And the way I used to say is that the lithium batteries are going to outlast the vehicle that you put them in, assuming that the electronics are good and the BMS is good. But nobody actually cycles them 5,000 times, especially with a lot of these campers. They may sit for a month between uses, and so they're really not being cycled on a daily basis anyway. So,
hey Ross,
that,
what resources can people use if they're maybe wanting to learn more about this stuff?
Yeah.
Or if they don't know anything at all, let's say beginners or wanting to learn.
Okay. Great question. So you can go to rosslukeman.com right here. Yeah, but I'm a power systems teacher, so I have an online membership. It's on your, if you guys got a flyer. If you didn't get a flyer, we have some extras. There's Mobile Power Insiders. We have a community from around the world. We have a forum. There's a Van Power Method Masterclass curriculum. And then once a month, we have a Power Systems call. And we have a mix of DIY builders, and we have some pros in there as well. And that's the Mobile Power Insiders. And then we have Mobile Power Pro, which is here. It's a partnership with Van Life Outfitters and sponsored by Arco and Victron and Epoch batteries. And that's down in Sarasota twice a year. That's also on your sheet. And that's more for pros, that people that want to do power systems for a living, but we have had some that just want to build their van and build it right, and they really want to know what they're doing. So we have kind of a mix of people that attend pro training.
Hey Ross, on
yes,
that
sir.
note, I took Ross's course
Hey,
last year.
Matthew.
And it made a complete difference in my ability with the system. So I highly recommend.
Cool, thank you.
What's your last
Thank you. Lukeman, Lukeman. So my website's rosslukeman.com, and there's a link on the website that says work with me, and it'll show all my programs. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Appreciate that. Good to see you. Yes, sir.
There's some YouTubes out showing some of the Battleborn batteries haven't aged very well.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen them. Is there anything to that?
I watched kind of the first video that came out from Will Prowse. I think Battleborn is going to update their design. So many of those batteries have been on the job for like a decade, so I didn't think that they were all bad. As far as the cycling, he was cycling them, an insane amount, which is not really going to be done in a real world scenario. Frankly, I didn't know if it was like a personal vendetta that he made all those videos, because he kind of sank the company. But I will say that the industry is moving quickly, and they need to innovate, and they may have left those battery designs too many years, and maybe they focus too much on marketing instead of redoing their product over and over. But yeah, I can't speak conclusively on that yet. Were you thinking about buying some, or you just wanted to?
I narrowly avoided them last year.
Okay, you almost bought some.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if it's more of a thing or a YouTuber.
I would.
If people do have them, should they be concerned?
Oh, thank you, thank you. I would say I would watch those videos and make your own conclusion. I mean, I would look. He was cycling them, you know, empty to full multiple times, and they were heating up. And I think I'm waiting to see what happens when he does the other battery brands like that. And then, so to get into the weeds on that, the marketing guy came back and he said, this is why this positive bolt is aluminum instead of stainless. It's our fail-safe bolt. And that made sense to me. And they were saying, oh, this is marketing gobbledygook. This doesn't make sense. And I was like, it makes sense to me. That bolt is there. If it overloads, it fails to prevent current from going out of the battery. So, but I didn't watch every video he made. It just, I don't know. I have to be careful because, you know, he's a sharp guy. He makes a lot of videos. He knows a lot. So I don't want to say he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I need to watch more of those videos. So I think he definitely, what he did was he made people a little bit scared to buy Battleborn, and that may sink that company. I don't know. So, does anybody else have? Yes?
Right at the beginning of your presentation, you were pointing that it was wrong connecting the batteries with that straight connection from one to another. And I see the other one, you're not going from a battery to another, you're going straight into the system. I've been watching many videos that they go from the multiple batteries, like measuring exactly, you know, the correct measurements to go from one another without being too tight, and then making the end match the other side. So
Yeah.
where's the wrong, where's the right? Because it's the first time I hear about
Great question. And I think I may have forgotten that part of my presentation. There's so many mistakes here, it's hard to cover all of them. So, did I talk about daisy chaining batteries? No? Okay, so these are daisy chained, and these are not. So daisy chaining batteries, it takes less copper. It's been done for years in the RV industry. However, with lead acid batteries, we didn't know the state of, we didn't have any data on what was going on inside the battery. Now we do. So we have an app, we can look inside each battery almost, you know, to this battery cell level. And we know that when you daisy chain batteries like this, even if you leave from the positive on one battery and leave from the negative, let's say these are the home run cables, you're going to leave, your home run cables that are going to go into the system are going to leave from opposite ends of the battery bank. Even with that, these batteries are not going to charge and discharge evenly. And with two batteries, you're kind of okay, but once you start getting 3, 4, 5, 6 batteries, the middle batteries are going to have an easier time, and the batteries on the ends are going to get hit harder. They're going to charge and discharge more, and they're going to die faster. And so the right way to do it takes more cable, more cost, is to have equal length cables running to each battery from a central point. So in this system, I got away with 2 batteries. I was able to connect them to 1 bolt and just flip the terminals back to back, pull the heat shrink back a little bit. You want to make sure that the terminals are not pulled apart. You want to make sure that the copper is, you have good surface area contact. So you may want to, don't run the heat shrink as far up as you would to the other cables. But basically what we're doing here is we're giving a round trip distance through each battery that's the same. So if we go down the positive, run through the battery and back, that's a certain distance, and we're going to match that distance for each battery, and that's where you would match the cable lengths. The caveat being the positives need to match each other, but you can see the positives are slightly shorter here than the negatives. So all we're doing, the electrons don't know whether they're in a red cable or black cable. They're just running through. And so the distance from these two bolts needs to be the same for every battery, if that makes sense. So the positives do not match the negatives, but the positives match each other, the negatives match each other. And what this is going to do, it's going to balance out the charging, balance out the discharging, and balance out the lifespan. Uh-huh.
What I've seen is that on the daisy chaining,
Uh-huh.
they like either on the positive or the negative, whatever is shorter, they are adding the end cable to match. So both sides are still matching the same distance. Would that then be okay?
The home run cable is the same?
Yeah, so for example, let's say the positive is closer to the source, right?
Yeah.
And the negative, or whatever the order is. So whatever is shorter, they are putting an end longer cable to match the whole match. So
it's a
it
waste.
has the same run.
It's I see the logic. They're kind of trying to do this, but when you, like you can see here, the positive, if we ignore the switch and the fuse, the positive to here is way longer than the negative. So you're saying they would make the negative extra long to go to match. It's not, because we're looking at the round trip distance. So from here through the batteries and back is kind of, so with this, you're basically duplicating, let's say the battery that's furthest away is dictating the cable length. So you would measure these cables and make them, and then you would replicate these cables for that battery. So you have some slop in there. But that only applies to this setup. So it sounds like they're mixing strategies here. So if you daisy chain, if I were to daisy chain, I would do it like this. I would make my negative as short as possible and my positive as short as possible. And I have seen vans where they did that. They'd have the positive was long, so they'd make the negative super long. It's a complete waste of copper, weight, money, and it also is, you're going to have, these are all resistors, right? So you're going to lose a little power. The longer that cable is, the more power you're going to lose, the more inefficient the system is. And so this negative does not need to match the positive. And I would say that logic does carry over to here. These negatives do not match these positives. They're different lengths. But these negatives match each other, these positives match each other. So, yeah, that was a great question. That was a huge point that I failed to cover. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, great question. We got...
You've got two batteries there, and you're doubling the terminals. What are you going to do if you got, say, 4 batteries? Do you have to get another distribution box and tie into that?
Yeah, so they make one of these that's basically, it's called Links Power In. It's just like this, but without the fuse blocks. And it'll bring in up to 4 batteries. You could use something like that. And frankly, you know, these batteries could be like 100-pound, 460 amp hour each. So nowadays, you're not going to have, used to be, like say 2018, you would have 8 Battleborn, 100s, and now that would be 2 batteries, 2 460s, 3 100 amp hours. Yeah, are they daisy chained? Yeah. Yeah, you're probably okay. I would say the battery in the middle is probably having an easier time. It'll probably last the longest. What's that? You could, but going back to his question over here, nobody ever wears the batteries out. So that's kind of the other side of the argument is you could... I did talk to, kind of a bad case was, I talked to an installer the other day. He worked with Airstream trailers, and they would use 5 Battleborns, and they would daisy chain them, but they were in different locations. So they would put like 3 inside and 2 out on the trailer tongue, and they would do the daisy chain, but they were so far apart. The daisy chain was bad enough, but then they put them, 2 separate areas, and one of them would basically die. It would get hit really hard, and then that would kind of take down the other batteries. So I don't want to overstate it. You're probably fine.
A few announcements. We have opened the Tiki Bar early.
Brian,
so
can you
can get your cocktails
Brian, can you give him the
starting
mic?
now.
I can't.
That's pretty exciting.
Currently, I've
We
got
have
100
more
amp hour
workshops
batteries.
coming up.
Say I want to increase my capacity. Do I have to keep 100 amp, or can I throw in a 460 amp hour with it?
I would use the same batteries. It's kind of like solar panels. You can get away with it, but it's better if you, because they have an internal resistance, and so if that's off, the electrons will take the path of least resistance, and it just kind of gets off.
We're going to have community photos.
Okay.
So we're going to try to
I think we're out of time, but I'll be around if anybody has any additional questions.
If you want to be in the photo,
It looks like we're moving on to the next event over here. But thank you guys for coming to the training. Appreciate it.